Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. Thank you for joining the second knowledge sharing session of Hack AI 2021. We have over 300 teams registered and are very excited to move on with this knowledge sharing session. So, this session will focus on understanding the Sustainability Development Goals. We have two very interesting individuals today. We have Bhagya Maheshi, who is a data scientist at Citra Social Innovation, which is a part of UNDP Sri Lanka. And we have Ahamed Nishadh, who is a Tech for Development lead at UNDP Sri Lanka. Please feel free to comment and ask your questions. You can submit your questions using the chat in either YouTube or Facebook, or you can comment there as well. And let's now start the session. Bhagya, over to you.
Thank you, Arifa. Thanks a lot. Let me start sharing my screen. Very good evening to you all. I'm Bhagya Maheshi, as Arifa introduced me. Okay, you all can see. So today's session, as said, we'll talking about understanding SDGs. Myself and Ahamed will be doing the session. Ahamed will join towards the end of the session for the Q&A. We'll be conducting the session in English. However, towards the end of the session, you can ask the questions regarding the thematic areas, the sub-thematic areas, or whatever we are talking here in Sinhala or Tamil. We are more than happy to answer in your preferred language. So with that, let's move forward with the presentation or today's session on understanding SDGs. So the agenda for the session today, the play that we're going to talk is first we'll talk about what is 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and then we'll talk about the 6 goals that we selected for Hack AI program, and then we'll go one goal at a time, for starting with goal 3, good health and well-being, goal 4, quality education, goal 8, decent work and economic growth, goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, goal 16, peace, justice and strong institutions, and finally goal 15, life on land. For each of the goals, we'll be giving a brief overview about the situation in the country, and then we'll talk about the 3 sub-thematic areas that we selected under each goal and possible data sources that you can use to collect the data, to create the background and all. Okay, let's start with what is 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, or we known as Sustainable Development Goals, was adopted by all the United Nations member states in September 2015 at the UN headquarters at the General Assembly. So this agenda provides the blueprint for people and planet, for peace and prosperity for now and into the future. So there are 5 main aspects this interconnected agenda look into. We call them as 5 P's. So they are people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. As said, this is an interlinked and integrated development framework which requires a holistic approach. If it is like a silos approach, we cannot achieve the target set for the 2013. So it has to be an holistic approach that we look in from different angles to make sure that everyone count in, that no one is left behind in the development agenda. So this 2030 development agenda is not an ad hoc framework. It was built on decades of work done by countries as well as the United Nations. So in this development agenda, there are 17 goals. Under each of these goals, there are different targets. If I say like simplified, there are 17 thematic areas. Under these thematic areas, we have 169 sub-thematic areas. And under each of these targets, there are 1 or 2 indicators that dedicated to measure whether the country is on the target, on the track to achieve the target. So altogether, there are 247 indicators. The indicators in the framework. The framework allows duplicating the indicators. Hence, there are a set of indicators that duplicated across the goals or within the same goal, which means there are 231 unique indicators in this framework. So if we look at the framework at a higher level, we can categorize these all goals into economical, social, and environmental as environmental goals. So with that brief introduction about this framework, we'll go into the selected SDG goals. So there are 17 goals, as I said. Out of these 17, we only selected 6. So what we selected for the competition is goal 3, good health and well-being, goal 4, quality education, goal 8, decent work and economic growth, goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, goal 15, life on land, and finally goal 16, peace, justice and strong institutions. So why 6? Why do you select 6? When we select these goals, we try to look into the big picture that create from the available data. What are the current trends in Sri Lanka from the data? What are the issues that we can identify and give a better solution through AI and ML? That is one reason. The other one was that we try to maintain a balance between the economic, social, and environmental goals. Finally, the third reason that we selected these goals is that whether we can find enough data to create a background, because we all know when it comes to an AI or ML based solution, we need to have a good data set in hand, or like at least a source that we can get good data in, so we can have better predictions or classifications coming out of it. So with this, I would like to move to the first goal that we gonna talk today, goal 3, good health and well-being. We all know that Sri Lanka have a long-standing universal free healthcare system. Anyone can go and get medicated from any hospital in Sri Lanka. So because of that, the country have achieved many healthcare indicators when it comes to maternal mortality ratio, under 5, and neonatal mortality rates. We already have achieved the global targets that set for the SDG framework for goal 3. However, Sri Lanka faces, in terms of mortality, higher rates associated with non communicable diseases, mental health, as well as infected diseases such as dengue, tuberculosis, or HIV. Apart from that, there are although there are free healthcare system in the country, the spending on healthcare is considerably high and the resource allocation is having far more disparities. That is the local picture at a like at a higher level, what is happening in Sri Lanka in terms of health sector. So with all these in the background, we selected 3 sub-thematic areas for the competition. The first one is communicable diseases. The second one is HIV incidence and prevalence. The third one is mental health, specifically looking into suicides. So we thought that the possible data sets that you can look into these areas would be, first one is the epidemiology unit website. They provide like wealth of knowledge on the diseases, the numbers, past numbers, and all. And also for HIV, there's a national platform on the numbers, the advocacy, and documentation. So with that, I'll move to the descriptions of describing you the sub-thematic areas. The first one, as I said, the first sub-thematic area is communicable disease. The definition of a communicable disease, a simple definition would be, it's a disease that spreads from one person or animal to another. So that is known as a communicable disease. According to the epidemiology unit Sri Lanka, the department, there are 2 basic categories for the communicable diseases identified within the country. So group A and group B. The group A have a cholera, plague, or yellow fever. And for group B, we have chicken pox, dengue, leprosy, tuberculosis, and that sort of diseases. And we all know we are right now homebound because of another communicable disease, corona, that we are COVID-19. And When we look into all these communicable diseases, we identify that they all have distinct symptoms and also spreading patterns. And to identify these symptoms and the spreading patterns, that we require the community support and the knowledge from the community, and then surveillance mechanism from the public health officials to combat them. So we believe that we can use AI/ML technologies for identification, containment, and mitigation of these communicable diseases throughout the country. With that, I would like to move to the second topic, the sub-thematic area that we selected, which is HIV incidence and prevalence. According to the data available in Sri Lanka, the first ever HIV patient was reported in 1987, where the locally acquired case were reported in 1989. According to the information available in the country, the high risk groups identified for Sri Lanka are sex workers, MSMs, or like men having sex with men, and IV drug users, basically the people who use syringes or IV technologies to infuse drug into their system. According to the latest data that is available, which is the first quarter of 2021, we have 11 reported cases for males and one female patient for the year age between 15 to 24 who have HIV infected. And when we look into the data throughout the years, there's an upward trend among young males to getting this disease. So the number says it's like 106% increase from 2015 to 2019, something alarming, where that the number is for female is 31%. When it comes to HIV, we all know there's social stigmatization and people avoid because of that stigmatization. They don't know what are the mechanisms to use or like supporting services and all. And also there's lack of knowledge and lack of awareness, both, and people don't know, and there's not enough programs to teach them how to be safe. So, and what are the support services available to them? So these are the landscape plus the key areas associated with HIV incidence and prevalence. So we believe that AI/ML can be utilized to create effective advocacy programs to combat this prevalence, increased prevalence of HIV among youth, because we see that the the high risk category is youth, young male. So if we can use better utilize digital technologies or AI/ML based tools to provide advocacy for them to get support or provide them knowledge, would be a better a chance from less people getting sick. The third topic that we selected under this goal is mental health, specifically looking into suicides. It's a key sub area on sustainable development goals, and we all know it's a prominent topic in Sri Lanka in recent years, and there were a number of deaths caused by suicides. It's There's no age for it, there's no education qualification for it, there's no gender for it. Like the depression, the anxiety, or any other mental condition can lead you for unfortunate death. So again, for this topic, the social stigmatization is there. Like if you're having a mental illness or like depression or anxiety, people are not confident to go and seek support, because if you go and meet a health professional, for example a psychiatric, you will get labeled as you are crazy. So people don't want to have that, so they avoid it. And also what we have seen here is due to these lockdowns with COVID-19, there's a high effect on mental health of people. So we believe that AI/ML based tools and technologies can use by health professionals to assist them to provide support to people in need. Maybe doing kind of like a self assessment and then see whether you need to go and meet a doctor also, that sort of a technology. So, with that, I'll move to the second goal of the competition. The second goal is goal for quality education. As the health sector, we all have free education policy in Sri Lanka, which gives us high rates of primary school enrollment, gender parity at the primary education, and high literacy rates comparing to the other countries in the region. However, that there are certain indicators that require our attention. For example, the gross enrollment ratio in tertiary education, which is below the regional average of the middle income countries, and also that Sri Lanka is one of the countries suffering from high rates of brain drain, which means the educated people are leaving the country. So, with that background, with that landscape, we selected three sub-thematic areas for the competition to focus on. The first one is enrollment rates for primary and secondary education. The second one is higher education, and the third one is ICT skills, or information and communication technology skills. So, to create the background and to find necessary data, we suggest you to look into the school census, which is conducted by Ministry of Education every year. And also we can look into the reports published by the University Grant Commission every year on the enrollment and completion rates of the university education. If we look a bit deeper on the enrollment rates for primary and secondary education in Sri Lanka, as I said earlier, enrollment rates are positive. It's a positive number. However, when we look into the application process, the enrollment process, it's very cumbersome for the schools as well as the parents. There are like different categories and different documents for each and every category, which make things very difficult and also opening doors for fraud or corruption. And again, because of that, this is a very highly criticized process in the country. That is on one hand. On the other hand, when we look into the enrollment rates for the secondary education, we see a drop among the boys as the age increase. When the age increase, the less and less boys engage in education. And the other issue that we see is the resource distribution for primary and secondary education. So the schools in the city have set of facilities which the schools in the village don't have. So there's a high resource gap in the resource distribution. And we believe that AIML based solutions can support better planning on the resource distribution and maybe support the system to identify possible dropouts from the schools, and maybe come up with processes to support like streamlining the application or like transfer process of the teachers out of schools. And then the second topic that we selected under this goal is higher education. Here we look into enrollment in higher education, which is a very competitive process. When we look into the numbers published by the University Grant Commission, according to the latest numbers, 62.42% of students who sat for the advanced level examination was eligible for the university entrance. However, only 22.98 was admitted to the universities. So there's a possibility to expand the infrastructure, number of universities, and get more students into the system. Another issue that we see is that there's a gap of the output from these universities. The students who are coming out of the graduates who are coming out of the university does not cater the demand in the labor market. So, on this competition, we thought, what if the AI/ML based technologies and tools can effectively support students to select subject streams and maybe predict possible student population for certain areas, and also the resource requirements for different thematic areas, the universities, and all. And also, based on the market requirement, the labor market requirement, there can be tools that suggesting these are the skills that is required for the next 5 years, next 10 years, which can actually support reformatting or recreating the curricula for the different degree programs. The third and the last sub-thematic area that we selected for goal 4 was ICT skills. So IT literacy is considered as a skill under goal 4, where there are a few criteria that specify as IT literacy. The first one is copying and moving a file or folder. The other one is copying and pasting within a document, and then creating a presentation, writing a computer program, finding, downloading, and installing a software, and finally file transfer between devices. So those are the key criteria identified under goal 4 for IT literacy. And we all know when it comes to ICT skills, it's far beyond that. And the way people acquire these skills is different from person to person. So we believe that AI/ML can effectively be used, one, to collect disaggregated data for this target, like how we can use systems to compile data, and maybe support users or people to do like a self-assessment on ICT literacy, what level of ICT literacy they have, what are the areas that they need to improve, that sort of a thing. With that, I'd like to move to the third goal, which is goal 8, which talk about decent work and economic growth. For the last few years, Sri Lanka had been maintaining the unemployment rates below 5%. However, there are like considerable disparities when it comes to the education level and by the gender on the unemployment. So where we see female unemployment rates are more than double that of males, so which means more women are unemployed. And also when it comes to the education level, when you are less educated or your level of education is low, there's a high tendency that you are unemployed. According to the 2019 data, there's the youth unemployment stays at 21.5%. And there are multiple social protection programs that cover multiple sectors. However, 66.7 of in the employed within the informal sector in 2019, which means that the people are not subjected to the national labor legislation or entitled to the social protection and employment benefits. So like a big portion is out of the social protection schemes. With that background and the landscape, the thematic areas that we selected for the program is, the first one is formal and informal employment, which actually talking about the skill level, whether you are skilled or unskilled labor. And the second one is equal pay. Third one is on sustainable tourism. And the fourth one, those are the three. And to start with the start creating the background for these areas, the crowdsourcing can be a possible technology that you can use to collect the information that you require. And specifically when it comes to sustainable tourism, the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority data sets that you can use on the tourism sector. Let's dig deep a bit about these sub-thematic areas. The first one on formal and informal employment. So when it comes to a specific industry establishment, whether your employee is skilled, how much skill that person have is a concern for that institution. And also when it comes to producing the statistical numbers, the statistics, the number of skilled and unskilled labor is a concern according to this international standard classification of occupations. So if we can provide a way to assess the skills of employees or persons, like self-assessing what are your skill levels and what are the skills that you have to that you have to improve, and then maybe based on the labor market requirements, what are the new skills that people have to learn, and also projecting what is the required labor force look like, possible solution that we can take from AI/ML based solutions. The second thematic area that we selected for the competition was equal pay. When it comes to equal pay, we are talking about that men or women getting the same pay for the same occupation. People who are having the same qualification, regardless their gender, they'll get the same pay. Because this is a very, it's not something that it is only seen in Sri Lanka, but it also at the global level. So when we look into the occupational hierarchy in Sri Lanka, we know there are like different grades, different classes, and pegs. What are the concerns? What we want to see is whether there's a visible wage gap for men and women, because we know there's a wage, wage gap between the government sector and private sector occupations. If you are employed at the same level, there are like different pays that you are getting. And what are the factors affecting this gap, and whether there's actually a gender gap in Sri Lanka on the pay scale. So what if there's like a calculator sort of a thing that we can understand the diversities among different salary schemes, and then we can inform the policies to make sure that the schemes are harmonized, there's like no conflicts, and then people actually getting paid for their qualifications at the with the right amount. So I think AIML can be better utilized in identifying those insights. The last subtopic that we selected on the goal 8 is sustainable tourism. We all know in 2019 Sri Lanka was selected as number one tourist destination, and we know for a fact there are like considerable number of tourists visiting every year Sri Lanka to experience the beauty, the hospitality, the adventure, the serenity of Sri Lanka. When it comes to an industry, tourism industry, it requires to establish the sustainable tourism practices within the country to make sure that the tourist attractions are protected and the families depend on this industry is protected also. So these are things going hand in hand. So we believe that AI and ML based tools can better utilize one identifying existing sustainable tourism practices, and then to promote them. Maybe identifying what are the latest trends in sustainable tourism area, and also provide potential business ideas, and also coming up or identifying new tourist attractions and events that we can better use in the industry. So we have talked three goals thus far. With that, we'll go to goal 11, which is on sustainable cities and communities. This goal is basically talking about having proper cities and then good communities. When we talk about the urbanization among Sri Lanka, within Sri Lanka, we rank among the least urbanized countries in the world. And also, research suggests that this is a the reason that we are at the least urbanized countries is because that the planning is not done properly. There's no the regulations being done properly. Because of the planning is weak, that we have weak transportation, the housing, the waste management, and the coexistence with the environment is difficult. um because of the caveats or planning is not properly done, whenever there's a natural disaster or climate change disaster happens, we lose many lives and property also. So the other concern with this lack of planning is that the housing demand, whether we can meet the demand of houses, and whether the people can afford them, and whether the houses are of quality that people can use it. In terms of the housing problem, the other concern comes on the waste management, because it's a crucial part in urbanization. Again, it's an environmental issue and a significant issue with the local authorities. So, with that background and the landscape for Goal 11 within Sri Lanka, the three sub-thematic areas that we selected for the competition is convenient access to public transport. The second one is safe spaces for all, and the third one is solid waste management. The To create the background and acquire required data, what we are suggesting is users can the participants can use crowdsourcing as a technology to collect the data. So if we look into the first sub-thematic area, which is convenient access to public transport, the at the global level, we consider that public transport is a key supporter that support the to eliminate the environmental effect from the fuel combustion, because many people can travel in one single vehicle, avoiding multiple vehicles going in the road. um, and if we can improve the public transportation system using digital mediums to provide ease of access and other services, we can actually attract more people to use public transportation. When it comes to the Sri Lankan public transport sector, we always complain about the ease of access and the effectiveness of the service. What we believe is that we can use AI and ML based solutions to come up with a solution, maybe an app, to give the users what are the bus routes, maybe where's the nearest bus for me, and possible routes for another destination. We select a destination and it provides what are the possible routes, and maybe identifying new routes where we can deploy buses, and then how we can better manage the resources, and also maybe come up with like new cost structures, and coming up with compensation schemes for the drivers and the conductors who are on the informal sector employment, because they are currently on day-to-day wage, and finally on the money collection. So there are different ways that we can use AI and ML based solutions in improving the public transport sector in Sri Lanka. The second sub-thematic area that we select for the competition is safe space for all. So when it comes to the SDG framework, that it talk about public spaces or public spheres that is safe, inclusive, and accessible, green and green and and green. So which means that anyone is free to walk there without any harassment, or and without the disability, they can access each and every component of that space. So again, when it comes to the framework, they specifically focus on women and children, older persons, and persons with disabilities. So in identifying this sort of public spaces, we can use the support of crowd. Maybe we can use news articles, maybe you can use social media data to identify or label that sort of place, and then maybe recommend for people. And as said, we can use AIML based tools or applications in identifying those places, and then providing advocacy around like what is mean by safe, what is mean by inclusive, what is mean by green, and also reporting about different safe spaces. Again, recommending people these are the places that you can actually spend time safely with your kith and kin, kids, or disabled friends, or older people. The last topic that we selected under goal 3, goal 11, sorry, just give me a second. Uh, Goal 11 is solid waste management. We all know it's a very huge problem for local authorities. So there's a state imposed law in Sri Lanka that we have to segregate our waste, which means we have to segregate into biodegradable and non biodegradable. However, we still have issues in waste segregation. Some complain that even though we segregate the waste, we'll they collect it at the same vehicle and go away. Or sometimes people complain that although we put them in on the correct date to collect, the municipal council or the authorities didn't collect it. So likewise, there are like multiple issues pertaining to this solid waste management arena. And we believe that gaming can be a better way of teaching people how to segregate waste. Maybe we can the maybe that game can focus on kids or young people to teach them how to segregate and make it a habit at home. So we believe that we can use AIML based solutions, one for the advocacy part, and then on the data collection, because there's very little data on the solid waste collection by different municipalities, and then also coming up with marketplaces sort of a thing to create like circular business opportunities, like on the recycling part of it. Or maybe providing people timetables, like when and where to put different waste in, and then what are the collection points. That sort of information providing platforms. That is for goal 11, which we are moving to the fifth goal for the competition, goal 15, life on land, which talks about the environment. um, Sri Lanka is one of the countries that have in the world 35 biodiversity hotspots in the world, and also a land that have high level of endemic plants and species. According to 2016 data, the forest cover is 29%, 29.7% of the total land. However, the deforestation is a key issue in the country that affects the biodiversity. So, this is due to the export plantation, and then commercial timber policies, irrigation development, or agricultural expansion. Because of all these reasons, we see that more forests are going into deforestation, and that is on the forest side. When it comes to the invasive alien species, we see many reports coming out, like multiple plants and species being identified that is a threat to the local plants and animals. And also, with all these things coming in, we see that there's conflicts between the animals and humans trying to coexist with each other. So that is, in a nutshell, the landscape on life on land. So with that, we selected three sub-thematic areas, which are land degradation, the second one, threatened species and plants, and the third one, invasive alien species on land and water. So the possible data collection mechanism that for these three areas we suggest to use is crowdsourcing. If we dig a bit more on the three sub-thematic areas, the first one, land degradation, and here, when it comes to agriculture, having a farmable land is a key concern, whether we can uh, plant something on this land. And to identify whether this land is farmable or not, there are visible and invisible characteristics. So what we think is that these characteristics can be used with AI and ML technologies to identify the degraded lands. What are the degraded lands? And maybe support the people to improve the quality of the land. And finally, compile data on land degradation for Sri Lanka. The second subthematic area that we selected is threatened species and plants. Um, as we discussed earlier briefly, we all know that Sri Lanka is home for many endemic plants and species. And there are a lot of them are right now on the red list index, which contains the threatened species and plants in the world. Recent days, we know that there were few cases reported. These plants or species were troubled by hunters or development projects. So, what if we can use AI/ML based tools and solutions to identify the endangered species and plants? Like we can use like a classification mechanism to see whether that plant or animal is an endangered one or not, and maybe identify locations where these animals and plants are located, and what are the conditions that they breed or the growing conditions for the plants, and then how we can reproduce them, and finally supporting collecting data. The other aspect of the plants and species is invasive alien species on land and water. As I said briefly earlier, this is a concern. There are rules and regulations to make sure that the invasive plants or species are not taken into the country through to air, by, or sea. However, we have seen at different cases there are invasive alien species were found, um, and like they are similar to plants in Sri Lanka, and like they're different from like small characteristic, maybe the petals of the flower, the way the stem is broken, sort of a thing. So we think that AIML tools can better utilize with like maybe classification technologies or like tagging methods to identify alien species, and what are the environmental conditions or like possible areas of spreading, and what is the rate of spreading, and then what is the threat it introduce into the like living ecosystems. That's all for life and land for goal 15. So with this we'll move to the last goal for the competition, goal 16, peace, justice and strong institution. So we all know that there were multiple initiatives or programs being done by different people, the government, the development partners, civil society, to instill the peace after a 30-year civil war. However, there are still concerns. There, if we look into the actions being taken, we have Right to Information Act, and there are like multiple peace building priority plans, and the development sector providing support to make sure that everyone is equally supported and concerned, and there won't be any other conflicts coming in. But time to time we see there are conflicts coming out of the country. It can be ethnic conflicts, it can be riots, that sort of things coming out. And the other aspect is that the government institutions, the institutional mechanism, the governance mechanisms are corrupted, one concern from the people. And then people complain about the rule of law, that not the law is applicable same to everyone. And when it comes to the public service, people say the service delivery is very unpredictable, ineffective, and also they support the red tape. So likewise, when it comes to peace, justice and strong institutions, there's not like a positive picture all around the country for goal 16. With that background, what we selected was three sub-thematic areas. The first one is conflicts. The second one is physical, psychological, and sexual violence or abuse. And the third one is safe walking alone. So, to identify possible data to create the background and required data sets for analysis, we suggest to use on news articles, social media posts, or technologies or techniques such as crowdsourcing. If we look into the first Subthematic area, conflicts. As I said earlier, Sri Lanka suffered from an ethnic conflict for 30 years. Apart from that, like time to time, we have different conflicts that damage the society heavily. What if we can have mechanisms to identify these conflicts early and then prevent them, so we can avoid loss of death and damage to valuable infrastructure? So we can, what we can better utilize the news articles, the social media posts to detect these type of conflicts. So we believe that we can use AI ML based technologies for early detection, reporting, as well as preventing the conflicts among different ethnicities in the country. The second subthematic area that we selected for the competition is physical, psychological, and sexual violence or abuse. When it comes to the SDG framework under Goal 16, it specifically talk about exploitation, trafficking, all forms of violence against and torture of children. The focus is solely on children. And when it comes to Sri Lanka, we saw multiple cases reported recently. With that cases being reported, there were social debates, discussions about abuse and violence. And then there are like official mechanisms being in place to report these abusive behaviors. But it's always underreported or never reported. It's a sad thing. And the saddest incident is that many people don't know that they are being abused. Sometimes they get abused in a public social media post, but they still don't know that they are being abused. What we suggest is that we can use AI and ML based tools to identify the abusive languages and provide mechanisms to report, and maybe to do kind of like a self evaluation to understand that you are being abused and maybe go to support. So there was a app developed recently called Beyond DV, like Beyond Domestic Violence, to support domestic violence victims to seek the official support to get out of this DV condition. The last subthematic area is safe walking alone, where we talk about the streets, but the streets are safe to walk alone. This is specifically focusing on women, children, and disabled person, because we all know that these three categories face different issues while they walk alone on the street. Crowdsourcing can be a technique, that powerful tool that we can use to identify these road segments, or like road segments that people actually having problems with, and maybe what are the environment factors that make these roads less accessible or like less safe to walk alone, and mechanisms to inform local authorities and provide reporting mechanisms, and whenever there's like a problematic situation. So with that, we cover the six goals and three sub-thematic areas for each and every goal. And I would love to open the floor for questions if there are any. Before we go to the questions, we would like to say the reason that we presented possible solution domain for the for these thematic areas is not to limit you to look into those solutions. We wanted you to think of them and then go beyond them. So those are possible solution scope that you can go into. You are free to look into the data sets, the background information, and coming up with another solution. Yeah, with that, I would like to conclude the presentation. We can go for Q&A if they have more. And we are happy to answer in Sinhala and Tamil for the questions.
Thank you, Bhagya, for that informative session. So if you have any questions, you can submit your questions using the chat or comment section found in Facebook or YouTube. Bhagya and Ahamed will happily answer all your questions. You can ask them in Sinhala, Tamil, or English. And while we wait for your questions, we're very excited to have over 300 registered teams who would learn and create some amazing AI solutions through Hack AI. It's also still not too late to register and make a submission. You have till the 21st of December.
While we wait for the questions to come in, Ahmed, you want to quickly brief in Tamil about the six goals and the thematic areas? Do you want to do that?
Hi. Yes, Bhagya, can you hear me?
Yeah, clearly I can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a
Thank
brief
you.
about like six goals.
Yeah. Bhagya, can you maybe put up the screen slide if you don't mind? So that we can quickly go. While Bhagya does that, so let me start. அனைவருக்கும் வணக்கம். நாங்கள் வந்திருக்கோம் ஹேக்கேஐ சம்பந்தமான ஹேக்கேஐ போட்டியில் நிலையான அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகள் சம்பந்தமான கருத்தரங்கு கருத்தரங்குக்கு இது பாக்யா முதலிலிருந்து நமக்கு அறிவுறுத்தினர். நிலையான அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகள் என்றால் என்ன, அவை என்ன என்றால் அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகள் என்றால் என்ன, எப்படி அது அந்த அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகள் உருவானது, மற்றும் இந்த போட்டிக்கான நாங்கள் தேர்ந்தெடுத்துள்ள நிலையான அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகள் என்றால் என்ன. இந்த போட்டிக்கு நாங்கள் 6 நிலையான அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகளை தேர்ந்தெடுத்திருக்கோம். மொத்தமாக 17 அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகள் இருக்கு. அதுல 6 அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகளை நாங்கள் தேர்ந்தெடுத்திருக்கோம். அதுல முதலாவது கோல் நம்பர் 3, குட் ஹெல்த் அண்ட் வெல்பீங். இது சுகாதாரம் சம்பந்தமான அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு. அடுத்தது தரமான கல்வி, குவாலிட்டி எஜுகேஷன் அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகளில் 4வது அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு குவாலிட்டி எஜுகேஷன், தரமான கல்வி. 8வது அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கான டீசன்ட் ஒர்க் அண்ட் எக்கனாமிக் க்ரோத், அதாவது பொருளாதார வளர்ச்சி சம்பந்தமான இலக்கு தான் 3வது அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு. அடுத்ததாக இருக்கிறது பார்த்தீங்கன்னா சஸ்டைனபிள் சிட்டிஸ் அண்ட் கம்யூனிட்டிஸ், 11வது அபிவிருத்தி இலக்காக 17 அபிவிருத்தி இலக்குகளில் இருக்கின்றது. இது நிலையான நகரங்கள் மற்றும் சமுதாயங்கள் என்ற அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு. அடுத்தது நாங்கள் பார்த்தோம்னா லைஃப் ஆன் லேண்ட், 15வது அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு லைஃப் ஆன் லேண்ட். இது தரையின் மேல், அதாவது தரையின் மேல் உள்ள சுற்றுச்சூழல் சம்பந்தமான அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு இதுதான். அடுத்தது நாங்கள் கடைசியாக 6வது இலக்காக நாங்கள் தெரிவு செய்திருக்கிறது கோல் நம்பர் 16, பீஸ், ஜஸ்டிஸ் அண்ட் ஸ்ட்ராங் இன்ஸ்டிடியூஷன்ஸ், அதாவது தமிழ் சொன்னாங்க சமாதானம், நீதி மற்றும் நிலையான நிறுவனங்கள் என்ற ஒரு அபிவிருத்தி இலக்கு தான் நாங்கள் 6வதாக இதுல தெரிவு செய்திருக்கோம். அப்ப இதுதான் நாங்கள் சம்பந்தமான போட்டிக்கு தெரிவு செய்துள்ள 6 நிலையான இலக்குகள். இந்த ஒவ்வொரு நிலையான இலக்குகள் உள்ளேயும் 3 சப்தீம் இருக்குது. நீங்க அவை என்னென்ன மற்றும் அதுக்குள்ள என்னென்ன அடங்கும் என்றதை நீங்க இந்த செஷன் முடிஞ்ச பிறகு திருப்பி லைவ் ஸ்ட்ரீமா செக் பண்ணி பார்த்து உங்களுக்கு பார்க்கலாம். உங்களுக்கு கேள்விகள் எதுவும் இருக்குன்னா உங்களோட சாட்ல நீங்க பார்க்க ஃபேஸ்புக், யூடியூப் அல்லது ட்விட்டர் சாட்ல நீங்க போட்டுடலாம். அப்ப அதை எங்களுக்கு விளங்கும். அப்புறம் உங்களுக்கு இருக்கிற கேள்விகளை நாங்க ஆன்சர் பண்ணலாம். தேங்க்யூ.
Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you, Bhagya and Ahamed. So it looks like we don't have any questions right now. And thank you everyone for joining today's session. We will keep you posted on the upcoming sessions which will cover the fundamentals of AI and ML related applications. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.